The Great Council Chamber on Meridian 7 Station was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Beings of every shape and size sat in their designated areas, their voices creating a low hum of conversation. The chamber was enormous, built to hold thousands, with a ceiling so high it seemed to touch the stars visible through the transparent dome above. Tae-sung stood near the human delegation area, his arms crossed as he watched the proceedings. He was a thin man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His dark hair was starting to show gray at the temples, evidence of his 20 years serving as a human diplomat. He wore a simple blue uniform with no decorations, which made him stand out among the other representatives who wore elaborate clothes and armor. The current speaker was Rakthar, a member of the Velkrin Dominion. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled skin a deep purple color that seemed to shimmer under the chamber lights. His species had conquered 47 star systems in the past century, and he carried himself with the pride of a warrior race. His voice boomed across the chamber as he pointed one clawed finger at the human section. The asteroid belt in the Kepler 442 system belongs to the Velkrin Dominion by right of proximity and power, Rakthar declared. The humans have no claim to it. They are newcomers to this galaxy, barely 300 years among the stars. They should be grateful we allow them to exist at all. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The humans had been members of the Galactic Council for 3 centuries, but they were still considered young by the standards of races that had traveled space for thousands of years. Tae-sung uncrossed his arms and stepped forward to the speaking platform. He moved slowly and deliberately, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. When he reached the center, he looked up at Rakthar without fear. The Kepler 442 asteroid belt was claimed by humanity 60 years ago. Tae-sung said calmly, "We have mining operations there. We have people living on 3 of the larger asteroids. These are facts recorded in the Council archives. Your claim has no legal standing." Rakthar laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "Legal standing? The law of the galaxy is simple, human. The strong take what they wish. The weak accept what they are given. Your species clings to your handful of worlds like frightened children. You speak of peace and cooperation while others of us have built empires." "We speak of peace because we prefer it," Tae-sung replied. His voice remained level, but something in his tone made several of the older species representatives lean forward with interest. "That does not mean we are incapable of other options. Is that a threat?" Rakthar stepped closer to the platform, towering over the human. "Do you truly wish to challenge the Velkrin Dominion? We have fleets that number in the hundreds. We have conquered races that were stronger than you could ever hope to be. What do the humans have? A dozen colony worlds? A few dozen ships?" Tae-sung met the Velkrin's gaze without blinking. "We have something you do not understand. We have patience. We have memory. And we have the ability to finish what others start." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the usual background noise of translation devices seemed to pause. An elderly representative from the Quilmar Collective, a species that had been traveling space for 5,000 years, made a small gesture that might have been respect or warning. "Empty words," Rakthar sneered. "The Velkrin Dominion claims the Kepler 442 system. You have 1 standard month to remove your people and your equipment. After that, we will remove them for you." "I strongly advise against this course of action," Tae-sung said. There was no anger in his voice, no fear, just a simple statement of fact. "Humanity does not bluff. If you force this conflict, you will regret it." Rakthar turned away dismissively. 1 month, human. Remember that your species exists in this galaxy because we allow it. Do not test our patience further." The Velkrin representative returned to his delegation, and the council session continued with other matters. But Tae-sung noticed that several of the older species were watching him carefully. The Quilmar representative caught his eye and made a gesture that in their culture meant, "Old wisdom ignored brings painful teaching." After the session ended, Tae-sung returned to the human embassy section of the station. His assistant, a young woman named Hye-rin, was waiting with reports. "The Velkrin are mobilizing their fleet," she said quietly. "Long-range sensors detect at least 50 warships gathering at their forward base." Tae-sung nodded slowly. "Contact Captain Hyun-woo on the Steadfast. Tell him to bring his ship to the Kepler 442 system. Authorization level Alpha Red." Hye-rin's eyes widened slightly. Alpha Red was the highest military alert level, used only when conflict was inevitable. Sir, are we really going to fight them? 50 ships against our 3 vessels in that sector? We are going to defend what is ours, Taesung said. And we are going to teach the Velkrin why the older species do not challenge humanity. I do not understand, sir. Why do the older species avoid conflict with us? We are small compared to many of the galactic powers. Taesung walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Because they remember their history. Because they know what happens when a species that evolved fighting for survival on a deadly world is pushed too far. The Velkrin are young and proud. They have never faced an enemy that refuses to accept defeat. They are about to learn a very hard lesson. 2 days later, Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Steadfast, watching the sensor displays. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with calm eyes and steady hands. He had served in the human fleet for 25 years and had seen combat twice before. Captain, we have incoming. His sensor officer reported. 52 Velkrin warships entering the system. All hands to battle stations, Hyunwoo ordered. Ready all weapons. Charge the main guns. Bring the shields to maximum power. His chief engineer, Ji-won, appeared on the communication screen. She was a woman with short black hair and grease stains on her uniform. Captain, I can give you 15% more power to the weapons if I reroute from life support. Do it, Hyunwoo said. Make sure everyone has their emergency suits ready. The Velkrin fleet approached in a standard attack formation. They outnumbered the 3 human ships nearly 20-1. On the main view screen, an image of Rakthar appeared. You should have left when you had the chance, human. Now you will learn the price of defiance. Hyunwoo stood and faced the screen. You still have time to turn back. This is your last warning. We will defend ourselves. Rakthar laughed. With 3 ships? Your arrogance is almost admirable. Almost. The screen went dark. Hyunwoo sat back in his command chair. Open a channel to all ships. Let me speak to every crew member. When the channel opened, he spoke clearly. This is Captain Hyunwoo. The enemy outnumbers us. They believe we will run or surrender. They do not understand humanity. We do not run from those who threaten our people. We do not surrender when others need us to stand. Today we show them why you never challenge the humans. All ships attack Formation Delta. Let us teach them. The 3 human ships moved forward to meet the Velkrin fleet. The Velkrin fleet moved through space like a massive wall of metal and weapons. Their ships were large and powerful, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. They had won countless battles using the same basic strategy. Overwhelming force applied without mercy. As they approached the 3 human vessels, Rakthar felt certain of victory. Maintain formation, he ordered from his flagship command center. When we are in range, we destroy them all at once. I want nothing left but debris. His second-in-command, a younger warrior named Vector, studied the tactical display with interest. Commander, the human ships are moving into an unusual formation. They are spreading apart but remaining within support range of each other. It does not matter, Rakthar said. They cannot escape us. They cannot defeat us. This will be over quickly. On the bridge of the Steadfast, Hyunwoo watched the enemy fleet approach. His hands rested calmly on the arms of his command chair, but his mind was working through dozens of scenarios and calculations. Beside him, his tactical officer Woo Jin was already plotting firing solutions. Distance to enemy fleet, 400,000 kilometers in closing, the sensor officer announced. Ready weapons, Hyunwoo said quietly. All ships, confirm readiness. The communications from the other 2 human ships came through. The destroyer Relentless and the frigate Morning Star both reported full battle readiness. Together, the 3 ships carried fewer than 800 crew members. The Velkrin fleet had more than 30,000 warriors. In the engine room deep in the Steadfast, Ji-won was making final adjustments to the power systems. She had rerouted energy from every non-essential system and pushed the reactors beyond their normal safety limits. The engineering crew worked silently around her, each person knowing exactly what needed to be done. They had trained for this moment, though they had hoped it would never come. Chief, reactor temperature is rising above the red line, one of her engineers reported. I know, Ji-won said, her hands moving quickly across the control panel. We will not need it to last long. We just need maximum power for the next hour. And if the battle lasts longer than an hour, Ji-won looked at him steadily. Then we will already be dead, so the reactor temperature will not matter. The young engineer swallowed hard but nodded and returned to his station. Above them, The two fleets drew closer. When the distance reached 300,000 kilometers, the Velcrin opened fire. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked across the darkness of space, all aimed at the three human ships. Evasive maneuvers, Hyunwoo ordered calmly. Pattern Theta 9. The Steadfast suddenly accelerated and twisted to the side in a maneuver that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. The Relentless and Morningstar did the same, each ship moving in seemingly random directions. The Velcrin weapons passed through empty space where the human ships had been just seconds before. Return fire, Hyunwoo said. Target their command ships first. The Steadfast's main guns fired, followed immediately by weapons fire from the other two ships. But instead of spreading their fire across many targets like the Velcrin had done, the humans concentrated all their weapons on three specific ships in the enemy formation. The first Velcrin ship exploded, its shields overwhelmed by the focused attack. The second ship lost its entire forward section and began spinning out of control. The third managed to survive but was heavily damaged and falling behind the formation. Impossible, Rakthar muttered, staring at his tactical display. How did they move so quickly? How did they punch through our shields? Commander, our weapons officers report that the human ships are not dodging randomly, Vector reported. They are predicting where we will fire and moving before we shoot. It is as if they can read our minds. Nonsense, Rakthar snapped. All ships attack pattern Omega. Surround them. They cannot dodge if we attack from all sides. The Velcrin fleet began to spread out, attempting to encircle the human ships. But as they did, something unexpected happened. The three human vessels suddenly accelerated directly toward the center of the Velcrin formation, instead of trying to escape. What are they doing? Vector asked in confusion. They are flying into the center of our fleet. They will be destroyed. But Hyunwoo had other plans. As the Steadfast plunged into the enemy formation, its weapons firing continuously, the larger Velcrin ships found they could not shoot without risking hitting their own vessels. The humans were using the enemy's numbers against them. In a small scout ship called the Swift Arrow, pilot Kyung-min was executing her own dangerous mission. She had separated from the main human force and was racing along the edge of the Velcrin fleet, too small and fast for their weapons to track easily. Swift Arrow to Steadfast, she transmitted. I have a clear run at their flagship. Requesting permission to execute maneuver Red 7. There was a pause before Hyunwoo's voice came back. Kyungmin, Red 7 is a one-way trip. You know that. Yes, Captain, I know. But if I take out their flagship, their formation will fall apart. It is worth it. Another pause. Hyunwoo's voice was heavy when he responded. Permission granted. It has been an honor to serve with you, Lieutenant. The honor was mine, Captain. Give them hell for me. Kyungmin pushed her small ship to maximum speed, racing toward Rakthar's massive flagship. Alarms screamed in her cockpit as the Velcrin finally noticed her approach and concentrated their defensive fire on her ship. Her shields flickered and failed. Holes appeared in her hull, but she kept going, her hands steady on the controls. Come on, baby, she whispered to her ship. Just a little farther. Just a few more seconds. At the last moment, she armed her ship's entire payload of explosives and set them to detonate on impact. Then she hit the emergency ejection system. Her pilot's seat fired out of the ship like a bullet, and she tumbled through space as her Swift Arrow crashed into the Velcrin flagship. The explosion was massive. The flagship's shields, designed to stop weapons fire from a distance, were useless against a ship that had already made physical contact. The Swift Arrow's payload detonated inside the shield perimeter, tearing a hole in the flagship's side that vented atmosphere and crew into space. On the bridge of his flagship, Rakthar was thrown from his feet by the explosion. Alarms blared everywhere. Half his crew was dead in an instant, sucked out into the vacuum of space. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, but the damage was catastrophic. Get us out of here, he ordered, pulling himself up using a console. Full retreat. All ships fall back. But the human ships were not finished. As the Velcrin tried to retreat, the three human vessels pursued them, their weapons still firing. The Relentless made a desperate ramming attack on a Velcrin cruiser, destroying both ships. The Morningstar, heavily damaged and leaking atmosphere, used its last missile to cripple another enemy vessel before its crew abandoned ship. The Steadfast fought on alone against what remained of the Velcrin fleet. On the bridge, Hyunwoo watched as more and more systems failed. Fires burned in 3 sections of the ship. Life support was failing. But his crew never stopped fighting. "Captain, we have lost weapons 1 through 4, Wu Jin reported, blood running down the side of his face from a head wound. "Only the aft guns are still operational." "Then spin the ship and keep firing," Hyun Woo ordered. In the engine room, Ji-won was performing miracles to keep the ship running. When the primary reactor began to fail, she switched to the backup. When that started to overheat, she vented coolant directly into space and ran the system cold. Her crew worked around her without question, each person knowing that their chief would keep the ship running until her dying breath. Finally, after 3 hours of brutal combat, the Velkrin fleet retreated. Of their original 52 ships, only 16 remained operational. The rest were destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The human fleet had lost 2 ships entirely, and the Steadfast was barely holding together. On what remained of his flagship's bridge, Rakthar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. How had this happened? How had 3 ships defeated his fleet? It was impossible. It defied all logic and military doctrine. "They fight like demons," Vector said quietly, his voice filled with something Rakthar had never heard from a Velkrin warrior before. "Fear. They do not fight to win, Commander. They fight to destroy. Even when their ships are dying, they attack. Even when they should run, they advance." "What kind of species does this?" Rakthar had no answer. For the first time in his life, he had encountered an enemy that his species could not simply overpower. And the worst part was knowing that this had been only 3 ships. What would happen if humanity sent more? On the Steadfast, Hyun-woo stood on his damaged bridge and looked at the stars through a cracked viewscreen. Half his crew was dead or injured. His ship would need months of repairs. But they had held the line. They had protected the human colony on the asteroids below. "Well done, everyone," he said quietly. "Well done." The news of the Velkrin defeat spread through the galaxy like wildfire. In council chambers and military headquarters across 1,000 worlds, beings watched the recordings of the battle with disbelief. 3 human ships had fought 52 Velkrin vessels and won. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. On the Velkrin homeworld, the military leadership gathered in an emergency session. The great war room was filled with the highest-ranking commanders of their species, all of them shocked and furious at what had happened. At the head of the table sat Dorvex, the supreme commander of all Velkrin forces. He was ancient by their standards, his scales scarred from 100 battles, his eyes cold as ice. "This is unacceptable," Dorvex said, his voice like grinding stone. "The Velkrin Dominion does not lose to inferior species. We do not retreat from any enemy. This shame must be cleansed with human blood." Around the table, the other commanders nodded in agreement. The youngest among them, a female named Karzin, dared to speak. "Supreme Commander, perhaps we underestimated them. The battle recordings show tactics we have never encountered before. They fight in ways that make no sense. Perhaps we should study them more before we attack again." Dorvex's gaze turned to her and she felt ice in her veins. "Are you suggesting we show fear? That we allow this insult to stand? The humans destroyed 36 of our ships. Thousands of our warriors are dead. And you wish to study them? I wish us to survive, Supreme Commander. I have watched the recordings. I have seen what they did. These humans do not fight like rational beings. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation. They turn their own ships into weapons. What kind of species does this?" "A desperate one," Dorvex said. "And desperate enemies can be broken. We will mobilize the entire reserve fleet. 200 warships. We will not just defeat them. We will teach the entire galaxy what happens when someone challenges the Velkrin Dominion. We will destroy one of their colony worlds as an example." The other commanders began discussing which human colony to target. After much debate, they settled on a world called New Busan. It was a farming colony with a population of 2 million humans. It had minimal military defenses. It would be easy to destroy, and the message would be clear to all humanity. Surrender or watch your worlds burn. On Earth, in the headquarters of the Human Defense Fleet, Admiral Sang-hoon received the intelligence reports with a grave expression. He was an older man, his hair completely white, his face lined with the weight of command. He had served in the fleet for 40 years and had hoped never to see a full-scale war. Beside him stood Yoonji, the head of psychological warfare operations. She was younger, in her 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that saw patterns others missed. She had been analyzing Velcrin communications for the past week. They are going to attack New Busan, Yunji said, pointing to the data on her screen. Their communication patterns show increased activity around that sector. They think it will be an easy target that will break human morale. How much time do we have? Sang-hoon asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. They are gathering ships from across their territory. This will be their full strength, Admiral. Everything they have, Sang-hoon nodded slowly. Then we must show them our full strength as well. How many ships can we get to New Busan in time? If we strip defenses from other sectors, maybe 50 ships. They will have 4 times our numbers. It will have to be enough. Sang-hoon stood and walked to the large window that overlooked the military complex. Below he could see thousands of personnel moving with purpose, preparing for what was coming. Contact Taesung at the Galactic Council. Tell him to make a formal announcement. I want every species in the galaxy to know what is about to happen. Admiral, why do we need them to watch? Sang-hoon turned back to face her. Because the galaxy needs to understand something about humanity. They need to see what happens when someone threatens our civilians. They need to witness why you never challenge the humans. 3 days later, Taesung stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Council. Every species was present, their representatives filling the vast chamber. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Everyone knew what was coming. Members of the council, Taesung began, his voice calm and clear. I come before you today to make a formal statement. The Velcrin Dominion has declared their intention to attack the human colony world of New Busan. This world has a population of 2 million civilians. Farmers, teachers, children, families. They pose no military threat to anyone. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the chamber. The Velcrin believe that by destroying this world, they will break human resolve. They believe we will surrender rather than watch our people die. They are wrong. Humanity has mobilized the Second Fleet under Admiral Sang-hoon. We will defend New Busan with everything we have. Rakthar, who was present despite his injuries from the first battle, stood angrily. The humans threaten us with war. We have 200 ships gathering. You cannot stop us. I am not threatening you, Taesung said quietly. I am warning you. Humanity is about to demonstrate something that the older species in this chamber already know. When you threaten human civilians, when you attack our homes and families, you do not face soldiers. You face something far more dangerous. You face humans who have nothing left to lose. An elderly representative from the Quilmar Collective raised one appendage. I wish to speak. When given permission, the ancient being's voice filled the chamber. 5,000 years ago, my species made first contact with a young race that had just achieved faster-than-light travel. They seemed weak and emotional. We believed we could guide them, control them. We tried to claim one of their colony worlds. They destroyed 3 of our fleets and did not stop until we begged for peace. That race was humanity. A shocked murmur ran through the chamber. The Quilmar representative continued. We learned that day what many of you have yet to understand. Humans are not like us. They do not calculate acceptable losses. They do not surrender when the odds are against them. They fight with a ferocity born from evolving on a world that tried to kill them every day. And when you threaten their children, their families, their homes, they become something beyond reason or mercy. Taesung nodded respectfully to the Quilmar elder. I invite all of you to observe what is about to happen. Send your long-range sensors to the New Busan system. Watch carefully. Learn the lesson that the Velcrin are about to be taught. And remember it the next time you consider challenging humanity. 2 weeks later, the Velcrin fleet arrived at New Busan. 200 warships appeared in the system like a dark cloud, blocking out the stars. On the lead ship, Dorvex looked at the peaceful blue and green world below with satisfaction. Begin the bombardment, he ordered. Destroy their cities first. I want the humans to watch their world die. But before his weapons could fire, alarms began screaming across every Velcrin ship. The human Second Fleet had arrived, appearing from behind the planet's moon where they had been waiting. 50 human ships against 200 Velcrin vessels. On the bridge of his flagship, the Phoenix Rising, Admiral Sang-hoon stood calmly as his ship moved into position. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They all knew the odds. They all knew what was at stake. Open a channel to the Velcrin fleet, Sang-hoon ordered. When the channel opened, Dorvex's face appeared on the screen. You are outnumbered 4-1, human. Surrender now, and we will allow you to evacuate your colony before we destroy it. Sang-hoon's expression did not change. You have made a mistake, Dorvex. You have threatened human civilians. You have come to burn our homes and kill our families. Now you will learn what that means. Are you insane? You cannot win this battle. Winning is not the point, Sang-hoon said quietly. The point is that you will never threaten another human world again. All ships execute Doctrine Alpha Black. No surrender. No retreat. No mercy, Dorvex laughed. You humans are fools. The transmission cut off as the human fleet opened fire. But this was not the careful, tactical fighting of the first battle. This was something different. This was humanity unleashed. The human ships did not try to dodge or maneuver for advantage. They charged directly at the Velcrin fleet, their weapons firing continuously. When a human ship's shields failed, it kept fighting. When weapons were destroyed, the ships rammed enemy vessels. When life support failed, the crews donned emergency suits and continued the battle. In orbit around New Busan, hidden observation stations from a dozen different species recorded everything. And what they saw would be remembered for generations to come. On the planet below, 2 million humans watched the battle in the sky above them. They saw their defenders fighting against impossible odds. They saw ships sacrifice themselves to protect the world below. And they understood that they were witnessing something profound. Humanity's refusal to let its people be harmed without paying the ultimate price. In the Galactic Council chamber, species representatives watched in silence as the battle unfolded on their screens. The older races nodded grimly, remembering their own lessons. The younger races watched in horror and growing understanding. This was why you never challenged the humans, not because they were the strongest, not because they had the best technology, but because when you threatened what they loved. The battle for New Busan raged for 18 hours without pause. The space around the colony world became a graveyard of shattered ships and burning debris. Both human and Velcrin vessels fell from the sky like dying stars, but neither side retreated. On the Phoenix Rising, Admiral Sang-hoon commanded his fleet with cold precision. His ship had taken heavy damage. 3 of its 4 main engines were offline. Life support was failing in half the sections. But the weapons still fired and the crew still fought. "Admiral, we have a report from the Silent Promise," his communication officer announced. "Commander Min-seok has successfully penetrated behind enemy lines." Sang-hoon allowed himself a small smile. The Silent Promise was humanity's newest stealth vessel, designed specifically for covert operations. While the main fleet had drawn the Velcrin's attention, Min-seok had slipped past their lines with a mission that could change everything. Far behind the Velcrin battle formation, Min-seok guided his ship through the darkness with expert skill. The Silent Promise was small and coated with materials that absorbed sensor waves instead of reflecting them. To enemy scanners, it was almost invisible. Beside him, Yuna studied the readings from her science station. She was a xenobiologist who had spent years studying alien species, but today her knowledge was being used for war instead of peace. She had discovered something about Velcrin physiology that could give humanity an advantage. "Commander, I am detecting the Velcrin supply depot ahead," Yuna reported. 3 cargo ships and a fuel station. No escort vessels. "The arrogance of the strong," Min-seok muttered. They never expected anyone to get behind their lines. He activated the weapon systems. "Target the fuel station first. 1 shot, then we move before they can respond." The Silent Promise fired a single torpedo. It streaked through space and impacted the fuel station, which erupted in a massive explosion that consumed all 3 cargo ships as well. Suddenly, the Velcrin fleet had no way to refuel or resupply. "Get us out of here," Min-seok ordered as alarm signals began lighting up his console. Full stealth mode. Back to the main fleet. On the Velcrin flagship, Dorvex watched in fury as his supply depot was destroyed. Without those supplies, his fleet could only fight for another day at most. His advantage in numbers meant nothing if his ships ran out of fuel and ammunition. "Find that ship," he roared. "Find it and destroy it." "Commander, we cannot detect it on sensors," his tactical officer reported nervously. "It is as if it does not exist." "Then search visually. Send out scouts. I want that ship found." But the Silent Promise had already vanished back into the darkness of space. Its mission accomplished. In the atmosphere above New Busan, fighter pilot Haewon led her squadron through a desperate battle. They were outnumbered 20-1, their fighters small and fragile compared to the Velcrin combat ships. But they had one advantage. They were protecting their home. Gold Squadron, form up on me, Heywan commanded through her communication system. We need to stop those bombers from reaching the planet. A formation of Velkrin bomber ships was descending toward New Busan's largest city, their bomb bays full of weapons that could kill millions. Heywan's squadron of 12 fighters was all that stood between the bombers and the city below. Gold Leader, there are too many, her wingman transmitted. We cannot stop them all. Then we use Dead Man's Dive, Heywan said calmly. All pilots target the lead bombers. If your fighter is too damaged to continue, make it count. Protect the city. She pushed her fighter to maximum speed, racing toward the bomber formation. Enemy fire filled the space around her. Her shields flickered and failed. Alarms screamed warnings in her cockpit. But she did not slow down. For humanity, she whispered, and fired every weapon her fighter had. Her missiles struck the lead bomber, and it exploded in a ball of fire. Then her fighter, damaged beyond repair, slammed into a second bomber. Both ships disintegrated, but the bomber's payload never reached the planet. One by one, Heywan's pilots followed her example. Some managed to destroy their targets and escape. Others made the ultimate sacrifice, their fighters becoming weapons themselves. Of the 12 pilots who had begun the mission, only 3 survived. But not a single Velkrin bomb reached the city below. On the planet's surface, the 2 million residents of New Busan watched the battle overhead with tears streaming down their faces. They saw their defenders dying to protect them. They saw sacrifice on a scale that defied comprehension, and they swore that if they survived this day, they would never forget what had been given for them. Back in orbit, Admiral Sang-hoon received the report of Gold Squadron's sacrifice. His face remained impassive, but his hands gripped the arms of his command chair tightly. They will be remembered, he said quietly. All of them will be remembered. Admiral, we have received new intelligence from Yuna on the Silent Promise, his science officer reported. She has discovered a weakness in Velkrin biology. They cannot survive in vacuum as long as humans can. Their suits fail after approximately 30 minutes of exposure. Sang-hoon's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. How long can our crews survive in full vacuum with emergency suits? Standard suits provide life support for 90 minutes, sir. A plan formed in Sang-hoon's mind. It was desperate and would cost lives, but it might be the edge they needed. Send a message to all ships. Prepare for vacuum combat. All crew members are to don emergency suits. We are going to vent atmosphere from every ship and fight in hard vacuum. His first officer stared at him in shock. Sir, that is against every safety protocol we have. If anyone's suit fails, they die instantly. And if we do not do this, everyone on the planet below dies, Sang-hoon replied. The Velkrin have better shields and armor than we do, but they cannot fight as long in vacuum. Send the order. We use our ability to survive in harsh conditions against them. Across the human fleet, crews received the unprecedented order with grim determination. They sealed their emergency suits, checked each other's seals and life support systems, and prepared for the most dangerous fighting any of them had ever attempted. On the Phoenix Rising, a young crew member named Tai-jin helped his fellow workers seal their suits. He was only 19, fresh from training, and this was his first real battle. His hands shook as he checked his suit's oxygen supply. Are you afraid? Asked the woman next to him, an older engineer named Bo-ra. Terrified, Tai-jin admitted. Bo-ra smiled gently. Good. That means you are smart. But look down at the planet. See that blue and green world? My daughter lives there. She is 8 years old and wants to be a doctor. If we do not stop these Velkrin, she dies, so I will vent into space if I have to. I will fight in vacuum if that is what it takes. Because that is what we do. We protect our families. Tai-jin looked down at New Busan and felt his fear transform into something else. Determination. Purpose. He sealed his helmet and gave Bo-ra a firm nod. Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were happening. Crew members said goodbye to each other, knowing that some would not survive the next few hours. But not one person refused the order. Not one person asked to evacuate. They were humanity, and humanity did not abandon its people. All ships report ready, Admiral, the communication officer announced. Sang-hoon took a deep breath. Vent all atmosphere. All ships attack Formation Omega, close to knife-fighting range with the enemy. Show them what it means to fight humans who have nothing left to lose. The human ships vented their atmosphere into space, becoming hollow shells filled only with people in emergency suits and burning determination. Then they charged directly at the Velcrin fleet with a ferocity that shocked even the battle-hardened warriors. At close range, where shields and armor mattered less, the human ships tore into the Velcrin formation. Without atmosphere to carry the sound, the battles happened in eerie silence. Ships collided and exploded without noise, weapons fired in complete quiet. But the destruction was total. Velcrin ships tried to respond, but their crews could not stay at battle stations as long as the humans could. After 30 minutes, Velcrin warriors began dying as their suits failed. After an hour, entire ships were drifting lifeless, their crews suffocated. The humans kept fighting. 90 minutes passed. Some human suits began to fail and good people died. But most held on. Their suits pushed to the absolute limit of their design. And they kept fighting. Dorvex watched his fleet fall apart around him. This was impossible. This was madness. What kind of species vented its own atmosphere and fought in the cold death of space? What kind of people sacrificed themselves so willingly? All ships retreat, he finally ordered, his voice hollow with defeat. Full retreat. We cannot win this. Commander, if we retreat, we lose all honor, Vector protested. If we stay, we lose everything, Dorvex replied. Order the retreat. Now. The surviving Velcrin ships turned and fled, leaving behind more than half their fleet destroyed or disabled. The humans did not pursue. They remained in orbit around New Busan, protecting it until the last enemy ship jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished. On the Phoenix Rising, Admiral Sang-hoon finally allowed himself to sit down. His suit's oxygen was at 5%. Many of his crew were dead. His beautiful ship was a wreck. But the planet below was safe. All ships, you may restore atmosphere, he transmitted. You have done well. 3 days after the Battle of New Busan, the Galactic Council convened for an emergency session. Every species was present, and the air in the Great Chamber was thick with tension. The recordings of the battle had been watched by billions of beings across the galaxy, and everyone knew that something fundamental had changed. Tai Sung stood in his usual place, but today he was not alone. Beside him stood Ambassador Sora, humanity's chief representative to the Council. She was a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much war. She had opposed the military action at first, preferring diplomatic solutions, but even she understood now that some lessons could only be taught with blood. The chamber doors opened and a Velcrin delegation entered. But instead of the proud warriors who had threatened humanity weeks before, these Velcrin walked with their heads lowered. At their front walked a female named Velkara, sister to the deceased Commander Dorvex, who had taken his own life in shame after the defeat. Velkara carried a simple metal container in her hands. When she reached the center of the chamber, she knelt and placed the container on the floor before the human delegation. Her scales, normally a vibrant purple, had faded to a dull gray. I am Velkara, now Supreme Commander of what remains of the Velcrin Dominion, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I come before this council to formally surrender to humanity. This container holds the ashes of our fleet. 200 ships entered your space. Only 12 returned. This is all that remains of our power and our pride. A shocked silence filled the chamber. Never in recorded history had the Velcrin Dominion surrendered to anyone. Velkara continued, her voice growing stronger. We believed you were weak because you spoke of peace. We believed you were soft because you cared for your people. We were wrong. We have learned what the older species tried to tell us. Humans do not fight wars to gain territory or resources. You fight because we forced you to fight. And once you begin, you do not stop until your enemy can never threaten you again. She looked directly at Sora. We attacked 3 of your ships with 52. You destroyed most of our fleet. We attacked your colony with 200 vessels. You defeated us again and protected your people. We have lost more than 160 ships. 30,000 warriors are dead. Our military power is broken. And you did this not because you wanted war, but because we would not listen to your warnings. Sora stepped forward and looked down at the kneeling Velcrin commander. Why did you ignore our warnings? Why did you force this conflict? Because we did not understand, Velkara replied. We thought your caution was cowardice. We thought your patience was weakness. We have conquered 47 star systems. We have defeated species that seemed far stronger than you. But we never faced anyone like humans before. What do you mean? Sora asked. Velkara stood slowly, her gaze sweeping across the chamber to address all the assembled species. In all our conquests, we fought rational beings. When we outnumbered them, they surrendered. When we destroyed their ships, they negotiated. When the cost became too high, they accepted defeat. But humans are not rational when their families are threatened. You do not calculate acceptable losses. You do not surrender when the numbers favor your enemy. You fight with a ferocity that defies all logic. She paused, her voice filled with something that might have been respect or fear. I watched the recordings of the battle. I saw your pilots turn their fighters into missiles to protect a city. I saw your ships vent their atmosphere and fight in the cold death of space. I saw crews stay at their stations even as they knew they were dying. What kind of species does this? From his seat in the observer section, Junho stood to speak. He was humanity's chief historian and had been given permission to address the council for this session. He was an old man, nearly 80, with white hair and eyes that held the weight of centuries of human history. I can answer that question, Junho said, his voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber. Humanity evolved on a world called Earth. It is a beautiful planet, but it is also one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. Almost everything on our planet tried to kill us. Predators hunted us. Diseases plagued us. Weather patterns could destroy entire regions. Other humans competed with us for resources. He pulled up a holographic display showing images of Earth's history. We survived not because we were the strongest species on our world. We were not. We survived not because we were the fastest or had natural weapons. We did not. We survived because we developed something unique in the galaxy. Pack-bonding instincts combined with tool-using intelligence. The images shifted to show early humans working together. We learned to care for individuals who were not related to us. We learned to sacrifice for strangers who shared our community. We learned that the survival of the group was more important than the survival of the individual. These instincts are encoded so deeply in our species that we cannot abandon them even when logic says we should. Junho looked at Velkara. You asked what kind of species fights the way we do. We are a species that will die to protect our young. We are a species that cannot abandon our people even when retreat would be logical. We are a species that evolved believing that no individual should be left behind. When you threatened New Busan, you threatened 2 million people we considered part of our pack. Our instincts left us no choice but to fight with everything we had. The chamber was silent as the implications of his words sank in. Finally, the elderly Quilmar representative spoke. This is what I tried to warn the younger species about. Humans are unique in the galaxy. Most spacefaring races evolved as individuals or small family groups. They learned cooperation later, as a logical choice. But humans evolved as pack animals. Their emotional bonds are not a weakness to overcome. They are a strength that makes them nearly impossible to defeat. Another representative from a species called the Zethar raised a tentacle to speak. I have studied human military history. In all their wars, even against each other, they have demonstrated this same pattern. During their Second World War, human soldiers would risk their lives to save a single wounded companion. In their Korean War, a small group of humans held a position against overwhelming numbers for days because they refused to abandon it. This is not rational behavior, but it makes them extraordinarily dangerous in combat. Tae-sung finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. The galaxy needs to understand something about humanity. We do not want war. We have always sought peaceful coexistence with all species. We join the council not to gain power, but to be part of a community. We speak of diplomacy and cooperation because we genuinely prefer these solutions. He paused, his gaze moving from species to species. But there is a line you cannot cross. When you threaten our people, when you attack our homes, when you try to harm our families, you trigger instincts that are millions of years old. We will fight you with everything we have. We will sacrifice ourselves without hesitation. We will not stop until the threat is ended, no matter the cost. This is not a choice we make. This is what we are. Sora stepped forward with a document in her hands. The Velkran Dominion has agreed to our terms for peace. They will demilitarize their fleet to no more than 30 ships for defensive purposes only. They will pay reparations to the families of humans who died in this conflict. They will accept a permanent human observer on their homeworld to ensure compliance. And they will share their story with all younger species who might consider challenging humanity in the future. Velkara nodded in agreement. We accept these terms, and we will do more. We will teach our children about this war. We will tell them about the humans who fought impossible odds to protect their people. We will tell them that there is a species in this galaxy that you should never challenge, not because they are the strongest, but because they will never stop fighting once you threaten what they love. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to accept the peace terms, but more importantly, they voted to add a new law to the Council Charter. It was read aloud by the Council Speaker, a neutral party who oversaw all sessions. By unanimous decree of the Galactic Council, no species shall initiate hostilities against humanity or their protected worlds. Any species that violates this decree will face immediate revocation of Council membership and military sanctions from all other member species. This law is enacted in recognition that humanity, when threatened, will fight with a determination that endangers not only themselves, but any aggressor foolish enough to provoke them. As the session ended and representatives began to leave, small groups gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. The younger species spoke in hushed tones, processing the lessons they had learned. The older species nodded knowingly, remembering their own encounters with humanity from centuries past. Velkara approached Sora before departing. "Ambassador, I must ask you something. How do you live with such powerful instincts? How do you control the urge to fight when it is not necessary?" Sora smiled sadly. "We do not control it. We channel it. We use those same instincts that make us dangerous in war to protect the innocent in peace. We use our pack bonding to form alliances and friendships. We use our refusal to abandon others to build communities and societies. Our instincts are not a curse.